I love digital cameras. Cameras in general, really. I love following the major camera manufacturers of the world develop and engineer these special tools that have such an impact in digital content creation. Having entered the camera realm at the start of the mirrorless era, I just love hearing from photographers and videographers alike about the cameras that they love and use. Now, I've been a professional hybrid videographer, photographer and video editor for over 5 years since finishing university. Back then, the most modern cameras we had access to were Canon 5D Mark IIs, which I still admire today for its photos, Lumix GH5s, which were in very limited supply and very popular in my faculty, and Blackmagic Ursa Minis, which were incredible, but not small, not affordable, and definitely not usable for anything other than professional video or cinema work. Now, during this time, Sony had made waves with the A7S II, the A7R III, and then finally, the A7 III. So when I finally graduated, getting my hands on a full-frame camera that was capable of great photos, 4K 25 frames per second and 100 frames per second in HD was extremely exciting, and I quickly fell in love with it from the minute I got it. And with only 2 lenses, by the way, a second-hand Sony Zeiss 24-70 f4 and the Sony 85mm f1.8, by far a brilliant combo if you're starting on any system, but particularly the Sony, their 85mm is a fantastic lens. But over 4 years, I fell out of love with it. Through a combination of factors that became more and more apparent as time went on, new cameras were released, new features were made the norm, and finally one big thing that led to me selling it. Firstly, let's talk about what it did right and how it does those things right by today's standards. Number 1 is video quality. Now, this is an obvious one, but a 6K oversampled image down to 4K is stunning, and whenever I came to edit it, it just made me appreciate how great it is at that alone. And at the time, being able to shoot full frame 120 frames per second in HD was a massive win. Even though looking back, it's not something it does that well at, it was still a really interesting feature to have at the time. Number 2, photos. The images I've taken over the years are always pleasing to look at, and especially with the 85mm f1.8, it is hard to take an image that you don't like on that lens. Next is autofocus. Autofocus is superb, especially having come from a DSLR in university. Having a phase detect autofocus system that is quick, covers a large part of the sensor, and is mostly accurate when shooting photos especially, it just makes it really easy to pick up and get good results. Next is weight. The weight of the body is really comfortable. Again, having used a 5D Mark II in university and for all my travels, this was a positive change to my camera bag. Next is battery life. The battery life is really good considering everything it could do. Those batteries held up quite well. Dual SD card slots and redundancy recording. This is essential peace of mind for professional work especially. And finally, just customization of the buttons. It just lets you decide how you want it to work and what you prefer to ensure the speediest and smoothest use. Now, you see the theme here, it really comes down to 2 things, feelings and convenience. When you're invested in the camera and equipment so much, it's these little things that allow you to use it to be better, learn faster, be wiser, and be more open to creative processes if you feel the tool in question is supporting you rather than hindering you. These features are the bare minimum essentials to a successful mirrorless camera today, but in 2018, these things were not all really found together in any one small camera body. That was until the launch of the A7 III. It truly is a great camera, and I genuinely still admire it to this day. And as of today, you can pick it up for under £1,000 second hand here in the UK, which is a bargain for what it offers entry-level users and prosumers. The fact that you can make that money back from using it on one project is proof enough of its value. And whilst the A7 IV is a brilliant camera also, if you don't need 4K 60, 10-bit 422, the very best Sony autofocus or a flip-out screen, you can save yourself £1,000 or put that towards a good lens or 2. So then the question is, why did I fall out of love with it? Why would anyone? Well, I grew into it, and truthfully, over time, I grew out of it. It started as the perfect camera for me, for someone of my knowledge and skills, and eventually became a camera that wasn't exciting or refreshing to use anymore. It's not that I couldn't get results or earn money from it, because I did do that, but it became more of a work tool than a passion, which when you're meant to be a creative and think creatively and passionately about what you do, and I guess you love cameras as much as I do in this case, it's hard to ignore those feelings. Now, for the record, I don't believe that it's necessarily the best way to think about it. Your camera is only as good as you, after all, but it wasn't exciting to go out and use anymore. And when playing around with other cameras last year, I realized what was missing. That spark, that desire to pick it up and just shoot anything and everything. That's the one big thing here. But to its credit, I think that just summarizes how far it took me as a photographer and a videographer. It took me 3 to 4 years of consistently using it personally and professionally before I even started to think about if I needed an upgrade. And it cemented how much I love the technology generally, if nothing else. But if you take my feelings out of it for a minute, it's also hard for the A7 III to stay relevant and competitive given how much innovation the mirrorless camera world has had since it was released. At the time it came out, the A7 III was a better, more capable and more affordable full-frame camera generally than the likes of the Nikon Z6, the Lumix S1 and the Canon EOS R. and it took Canon and Lumix a few years to compete in that price range thereafter. Since then, it's been replaced by the A7 IV, another brilliant model, albeit that magic and splash wasn't replicated when the 4 was released. I'd argue the reason perhaps why it never had its A7 III moment was because of the 4's slightly higher price tag at launch and not raising the roof on its sibling cameras like the A7 III had back in the day. The A7 III still held its place an affordable workhorse after the 4 was released, especially as it came down in price. Fast forward to the last 12 months, they've created even more capable cameras at cheaper price levels like the A7C, the ZV-E1, while other brands have found their groove in their own price brackets and use cases. Fujifilm dominate the APS-C and medium format market. Nikon Z9 and Z8 offer a lot of value but at professional price tags for those who need it. Canon's bodies are now as good and as varied as Sony's and take just as good photos and video, and while Panasonic continued to keep the Micro Four Thirds system alive and well, their most recent entry into the full frame market, the S5 II, did exactly what the A7 III did all those years ago. Offer great value for money in the prosumer price range, but with innovative and as yet unparalleled features. And so the A7 III was no longer relevant in today's market. Except it is. In my opinion, it's by far the most relevant and important mirrorless camera in the last 10 years, kickstarting a new race of innovation and keeping consumers invested for years to come. The leap the A7 III made from previous cameras for entry-level consumers, prosumers, and professionals looking for an affordable workhorse, utilizing features and abilities that we now take for granted, clearly primed Sony for its successes that were to come with the A7S III, the A1, the A7 IV, and set up the other major brands for a wake-up call that mirrorless, full-frame cameras can be a thing for everyone, and that's not going to change. I owe a lot to that camera. My career today is because of that camera. It wasn't perfect, as no camera is, but for me, I was able to grow as a creative and hone my skills as a videographer and photographer, and with the amount of hype it received online, I had plenty of resources and experience to help me learn along the way with it. But yet, I said goodbye to it late last year. After weeks worth of footage, thousands of photos and hours of research, it was time to move on. And I settled on my next step into the current generation of cameras that I could further grow into for the next few years. I really hope you enjoyed this video or got something out of it. If you did, it would be greatly appreciated if you could leave a like, comment and subscribe. I've got a few more videos in the pipeline, but as you might be able to tell, I'm new to this sort of thing. So if you've made it to the end, thank you kindly. And if you're a current or former A7 III owner, I'd love to know your thoughts on the camera and the impact it's had on you. I've been Jake, thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.